The galaxy burned with the truth, and the Sovereignty Council that had ruled for 3,000 years began to crumble like a castle built on sand within. Hours of the broadcast, 3 council species announced their immediate withdrawal from the Alliance, and their fleets around Earth powered down their weapons and requested permission to leave peacefully. "Let them go," Admiral Cho Yunji ordered, and she watched on her tactical display as dozens of ships turned away from the planet they had come to conquer. The remaining council forces suddenly found themselves outnumbered and surrounded, and many of their commanders had seen the same broadcast as everyone else and were questioning whether they wanted to die for leaders who had lied to them for centuries on. The surface of Earth, the fighting began to slow as council troops received confused and contradictory orders. And some units continued to fight, but others simply stopped and waited for someone to tell them what to do. Private Moon Jisoo emerged from her barricade and watched as a squad of alien soldiers laid down their weapons and raised their arms in surrender. "What do we do with them?" one of her fellow soldiers asked. "We take them prisoner," Jisoo replied. "We are not like the council, and we do not execute those who surrender." The word spread through the human forces that prisoners were to be treated with dignity. And this was not mercy born of weakness, but strength born of principle. And it sent a message to every alien watching that humanity was different from the masters they had feared. In orbit above Earth, Councillor Vareth refused to accept defeat, and he stood on the bridge of his flagship and screamed orders at officers who no longer obeyed him. "We will bombard their cities," he raged. "We will turn their world to glass and ash." "No, Counselor," his weapons officer replied quietly. "We will not." Vareth spun to face the officer with fury in his compound eyes. "You dare disobey me?" "I dare to refuse an order that would make us no better than the monsters the humans have revealed us to be," the officer said. And his voice was steady, even though his hands trembled. Other officers on the bridge nodded their agreement, and Vareth realized with growing horror that he had lost control of his own ship. "You are all traitors," he shrieked. "No," the weapons officer replied. "We are soldiers who finally understand what we have been fighting for, and it was never honor or justice. And it was only the power of beings who cared nothing for any of us." Security officers moved forward and took Vareth into custody. And for the first time in council history, a counselor was arrested by their own people. The news of Vareth's arrest spread quickly, and it broke whatever remained of council authority over the invasion fleet. And ship after ship signaled their surrender to the human forces. Ambassador Yoon Seo-jin emerged from her bunker and walked through the ruins of Geneva, and she looked at the destruction that the council had wrought and felt grief for everything that had been lost. But she also felt hope because humanity had survived and the galaxy had changed. Forever, she was escorted to a communication center where she could address the watching universe, and she knew that her words would shape the future of human relations with every species in known space. "People of the galaxy," she began. "Today you have seen the truth about the Sovereignty Council, and you have seen what they were willing to do to maintain their power. And you have seen what happens when a species refuses to submit." She paused and looked directly into the camera. "Humanity did not seek this war, and we did not want to become enemies of the Council. But when they demanded our freedom and our future, we had no choice but to fight. Some will say that we were reckless and that we should have accepted the Council's terms and survived as a controlled species. But humanity has never been good at accepting change, and we never will be." She straightened her shoulders and spoke with the full authority of her wounded but unbroken world. "To those species who supported the Council's actions against us, we do not seek revenge, and we know that many of you were deceived just as we were. And we offer you the chance to build something new together. To those species who withdrew from the invasion and refused to participate in the destruction of our world, we thank you, and we hope that this is the beginning of friendship rather than the end of conflict. And to those species who have lived under council oppression for generations, who have watched your freedoms disappear and your voices be silenced, we say this: you are not alone anymore. She felt tears in her eyes, but she did not wipe them away because they were honest and real. Humanity will never seek to rule over others as the council did. And we will never demand that other species surrender their sovereignty to us. But we will always stand with those who fight for their freedom. And we will always remember those who stood with us in our darkest hour. The broadcast ended and Seojin stepped away from the camera. And she felt the exhaustion of the past days finally catch up to her. But there was still one more thing she needed to see. Defiance returned to Earth 3 days later. And its hull was scorched and battered, but it flew under its own power. And Captain Kale Min-yuk brought his ship into orbit above a world that had survived against impossible odds. He stood at the viewport and looked down at the planet where he had been born. And he could see the scars of battle on the continents below. But he could also see lights in the cities that meant people were rebuilding. Lieutenant Shin Yuna joined him at the viewport. And she had a bandage on her arm where an enemy shot had grazed her during the fighting at the archives. We lost 11 crew members, she said quietly. Good people who deserve to see this. They did see it, Min-yuk replied. They saw it when they chose to fight. And they knew what we were fighting for. He thought about the soldiers who had died on that station. And he promised himself that he would remember every one of their names for as long as he lived below them on Earth. The work of rebuilding had already begun. And humans worked alongside aliens who had defected from the council and chosen to help repair the damage their former masters had caused. Rin had stayed on Earth to help with the reconstruction. And they had become a symbol of hope for other species who wanted to break free from council control. Messages continued to arrive from across the galaxy as species reached out to humanity with offers of trade and alliance and friendship. And the isolation that humans had always feared was replaced by connections they had never imagined possible. In Geneva, Ambassador Yoon Seojin met with representatives from a dozen species who had come to discuss the formation of a new galactic alliance, one built on principles of mutual respect and freedom rather than domination and fear. We cannot become what we fought against, she told them. Whatever we build together must be different from what the council was. The representatives agreed, and they began the long process of creating something new from the ashes of the old order. And somewhere in the vastness of space, a young being on a distant world watched recordings of humanity's stand against the council, and they felt something stir in their heart that they had never felt before. It was hope. Humanity had not just survived, they had shown the galaxy that even the smallest and youngest species could stand against tyranny. And when they had lit a fire that would never go out, and the universe would never be the same. The council fleet broke through the last line of orbital defenses and began landing troops on Earth. And the commanders expected swift surrender and minimal resistance. They were wrong. Private Moon Jisoo crouched behind a barricade in the streets of Seoul and watched the alien transport ships descend through clouds of smoke and fire. And her rifle felt heavy in her hands, but her heart was steady. Here they come, a sergeant whispered. The transport doors opened and council soldiers poured out. And they wore gleaming armor and carried weapons that could vaporize a human with a single shot. And they moved with the confidence of warriors who had never known defeat. Jisoo aimed at the lead soldier and squeezed the trigger, and the alien stumbled and fell. And suddenly, the street erupted in gunfire as every hidden human position opened up at once. The council soldiers scattered for cover, and their surprise was obvious because they had been told this species would break at the first sign of overwhelming force. But humanity did not break in Mumbai and Lagos and snow. Apollo and 100 other cities, the same scene played out. And council troops landed expecting conquered subjects and found instead a population that had chosen to fight. Council of Varath watched the reports from his flagship in orbit and felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Doubt. Casualties are exceeding projections by 400%. His tactical officer reported, the humans are not surrendering, and every building has become a defensive position. Then destroy the buildings, Varath ordered. We are trying, Counselor, that they have moved their civilians into underground shelters, and the soldiers blend into the population so perfectly that we cannot target them without destroying entire districts. Varath's compound eyes flickered with anger, because this was not how conquest was supposed to work. And these humans were fighting like cornered animals instead of accepting their fate with dignity. Bring down more troops, he commanded. Flood every city with soldiers until resistance becomes impossible. But even as he gave the order, he knew that time was working against him, because the Council Alliance was not as unified as it appeared. And already 3 member species were questioning whether this invasion was worth the cost. Far from Earth, the Defiance dropped out of jump space at the edge of the system that held the Sovereignty archives. And Captain Kale Minyuk studied the tactical display and felt his stomach tighten. 12 patrol ships, Lieutenant Shin Yuna reported. And the station itself has defensive batteries that could cut us apart in seconds. Then, we need to make sure they do not see us until it is too late. Minyuk Replydron stepped forward and began entering commands into the navigation console. There is a maintenance corridor through the asteroid field, they explained. The Council uses it for supply ships, and if we follow the correct path, the station sensors will identify us as a routine delivery. And when we reach the station? Yuna asked. I can get you through the security checkpoints, Rin said. After that, we will need to fight. Minyuk gathered his boarding team in the cargo bay, and these were the best soldiers on the ship. And they had volunteered for a mission they knew might be their last. Our target is the Central Broadcast Core, he told them. Rin has the data files that will expose the Council, and all we need to do is upload them and activate the Galactic Emergency Broadcast System. Simple enough, one of the soldiers said with a grim smile. The station has over 5,000 personnel. Minyuk continued. Most of them are archivists and administrators. But there is also a security force of 300 trained warriors. Still simple, the soldier replied. And his smile did not waver. The Defiance crept through the asteroid field like a ghost. And the station sensors swept past them without alarm. And they docked at a maintenance port that Rin had identified as lightly guarded. The boarding team moved quickly and quietly through the station corridors, and Rin guided them around patrol routes and security checkpoints. And they reached the central core without firing a single shot. Then their luck ran out. Intruders. A guard shouted as they rounded a corner, and suddenly the corridor was filled with weapons fire. Minyuk dove behind a support pillar and returned fire. And his soldiers spread out to engage the station security forces that seemed to materialize from every direction. Rin, get to the broadcast core, he shouted. We will hold them here. Rin hesitated for only a moment before running toward the massive doors that led to the heart of the archives. And Lieutenant Shin and 2 soldiers followed to provide protection. The fighting was brutal and close. And Council soldiers fell, but so did humans. And Minyuk felt a shot graze his arm, but he kept firing because stopping meant death for everyone he loved inside the broadcast. Core Yuna fought her way to the main console, while Rin worked frantically to upload the data files. How long? Yuna demanded as she dropped another guard with a precise shot. The files are massive, Rin replied. 3 minutes minimum. 3 minutes felt like 3 years as the security forces pressed their attack. And one of Yuna's soldiers fell with a cry of pain. And she knew they were running out of time. Then the upload. completed, and Rin activated the emergency broadcast. "System, it is done," they whispered across the galaxy. Every communication system capable of receiving signals suddenly lit up with the same transmission, and the evidence of the Council's crimes began to flow into every corner of civilized space. On 100 worlds, beings watched in horror as they learned the truth about the alliance they had trusted, and they saw records of genocide and oppression and lies that stretched back thousands of years on Earth. Ambassador Yoon Seo-jin watched the broadcast from her bunker and felt tears stream down her face because they had done it. "All channels," she ordered her communications officer, "broadcast our message now." Her voice went out to every human and every alien watching the transmission. "The Council wanted to control humanity," she said. "They wanted to add us to their list of conquered species, but we refused. And now you have seen what they truly are." She paused and gathered herself for the words that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. "To every species living under Council rule, we say this: you do not have to accept tyranny, and you do not have to bow to those who would erase you from history. And if you choose to stand up and fight for your freedom, humanity will stand with you." In orbit above Earth, Counselor Vareth watched his carefully constructed alliance begin to collapse as member species withdrew their forces and demanded explanations. "This is a human trick," he screamed at his commanders. "The evidence is fabricated." But no one believed him because the records were too detailed and too comprehensive to be false. And even his own officers were looking at him with new eyes. The war was not over. But the Council had already lost, and somewhere in the chaos of the archive station, Captain Kale Minuk and his surviving team fought their way back to the Defiance. And they carried their wounded and left their dead behind. And they knew that their sacrifice had been worth it. Humanity had struck at the heart of its enemy. Now it was time to finish the fight. The Council fleet crossed the orbit of Neptune, and their commanders felt nothing but contempt for the species they had come to conquer. And they exchanged messages about how quickly this operation would be finished and how they would divide the spoils of Earth among themselves. Fleet Commander Dex of the Verdani species sat in his command throne and watched the tactical display that showed clear space between his fleet and the target planet. "Any sign of human military response?" he asked his sensor officer. "Negative, Commander," the officer replied. "Their fleet appears to be holding position near the third planet, and they have made no move to intercept us." Dex clicked his beak in satisfaction because this was exactly what he had expected. And these humans were clearly too frightened to face the might of the Council in open space. "They will surrender before we even reach them," he predicted. "This will be the easiest conquest in Council history." His fleet pushed deeper into the solar system and crossed the orbit of Uranus without incident. And the confidence among his officers grew with every passing hour. Then they reached the asteroid belt. The first explosion came without warning, and a Verdani cruiser simply vanished in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness. And before anyone could react, 2 more ships died in the same way. "Mines!" the sensor officer screamed. "The belt is filled with mines." Dex gripped his command throne as his fleet scattered to avoid the hidden weapons. But the mines were not the only danger. And automated defense platforms emerged from asteroids that had looked completely natural and began firing on any ship. Within range, 43 ships died in the first hour of the engagement. And Dex was forced to halt his advance while his fleet cleared a path through the killing field on the bridge of the Defiance. Captain Kale Minuk watched the distant flashes of light that marked dying Council ships and allowed himself a small smile. "Phase 1 is working." Lieutenant Shin Yuna observed. "It will only slow them down," Minuk replied. "But every hour they spend clearing those mines is an hour Earth has to prepare." The Defiance was far from the battle. racing through empty space toward the coordinates Ambassador Yoon had provided. And they were about to meet someone who might give them a chance to end this war. Rendezvous point was a dead star surrounded by frozen rocks. And it was the kind of place where no one went unless they had something to hide. A small ship waited for them in the shadow of an ice-covered moon. And its design was unfamiliar to the human crew. "Open a channel," Minyuk ordered. The view screen flickered and revealed a being unlike any Minyuk had seen before. And it had smooth gray skin and large dark eyes and delicate features that seemed almost fragile. "I am Rin," the being said. And its voice was soft but clear. "I was told you would come. I am Captain Kale Minyuk of the Earthship Defiance," he replied. "Ambassador Yoon said you have information that could help us." "I have more than information," Rin said. "I have the truth about what the Council really is. And I have the proof to show the galaxy." Rin's ship docked with the Defiance and the alien came aboard. And Minyuk met them in the conference room with Lieutenant Shin and his senior officers. "I am Veluxi," Rin explained. "My species joined the Council 400 years ago. And for most of that time, we believed we were part of something noble. But then I was assigned to the Sovereignty Archives, and I learned what the Council has been hiding." "What did you find?" Yuna Askidron's large eyes seemed to fill with grief and anger. "The Council does not maintain peace," they said. "The Council maintains control, and any species that threatens that control is eliminated." They placed a data crystal on the table, and it projected holographic images that made every human in the room feel sick. 17 species have been wiped out by the Council in the last 1,000 years. Rin continued. Their crime was growing too fast or asking too many questions or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the Council erased them and erased the evidence and rewrote history to pretend they never existed. And humanity is next on their list, Minyuk said quietly. Humanity was added to the list the moment you achieved faster than light travel. Rin confirmed. Directive 7 Alpha was never meant to control you. And it was meant to weaken you so that your eventual extinction would be easier. The room was silent as the humans absorbed this information. And Minyuk felt something cold and hard settle into his chest. "You said you have proof," he said. "The Sovereignty Archives contain records of every crime the Council has committed," Rin replied. "Every genocide, every cover-up, every lie. And if we can broadcast those records to the galaxy, the Council will be finished." "Where are these archives?" Yuna Skedron showed them a star map that highlighted a station deep in Council space. And it was heavily defended and far from any human territory. "Getting there will be almost impossible," Rin admitted. "But I know the security protocols and I know the patrol schedules. And with a ship as fast as the Defiance, we might have a chance." Minyuk looked at his officers and saw the same determination in their eyes that burned in his own heart. "We did not come this far to turn back," he said. "Plot a course for the archives, while the Defiance raced toward its target." The battle for Earth continued to unfold. The Council fleet pushed through the asteroid belt at great cost and resumed its advance toward the inner system. And now they approached Mars, where the second line of human defenses waited. General Nam Hyung-woo commanded the ground forces on Earth. And he watched the tactical displays and knew that the orbital battle was only half of the war. "How are the preparations?" he asked his aide. "Every major city has established defensive positions," the aide reported. "The civilian militia program has enrolled over 200 million volunteers. And the underground networks are ready to begin operations the moment the enemy lands." Nam nodded because this was what humanity did when faced with extinction. And they did not surrender, and they did not despair. And they fought with everything they had until there was nothing left to give. "The Council expects us to break," he said. "They expect us to look at their ships and their soldiers and fall to our knees. But they have never faced a species that evolved on a death world. and they do not understand what we are capable of. His aide smiled grimly, because every human understood what the general meant. Earth was not a gentle world, and it had forged humanity in fire and ice and flood and famine. And the survivors of that crucible did not know how to give up. Ambassador Yoon Se-ojin coordinated resistance communications from a bunker beneath the ruins of what had once been a beautiful city, and she sent messages of hope and defiance to every human settlement in the solar system. "Hold the line," she broadcast. "The defiance is coming. And when she returns, she will bring the weapon that will break the Council forever." In the depths of space, the Defiance pushed its engines to their limits, and Rin worked with the human crew to plan their assault on the archives. And Captain Minyuk looked at the stars and made a promise to the billions of souls counting on him. Would succeed or he would die trying. And either way, the Council would learn that humanity was not a species to be trifled with. The first phase of the war had been about survival. The second phase was about to begin, and it would be about revenge. The warning reached Earth at 3 in the morning Geneva time, and within 20 minutes, every leader on the planet was awake and scrambling towards secure communication channels. Director Bei Jiwan of Earth Defense Intelligence stood in the underground command center beneath the Swiss Alps and watched data streams pour across dozens of screens. And each new piece of information made the situation look worse. 312 confirmed vessels, our senior analyst reported. Mixed fleet composition from 5 council species. And they exited jump space 4 hours ago at the edge of the Kuiper Belt. Time until they reach Earth orbit? Jiwan asked. At their current speed, approximately 61 hours. Jiwan closed her eyes for a moment and allowed herself 3 seconds of fear before she locked it away. And when she opened her eyes again, her face showed nothing but calm determination. The door behind her opened and Admiral Cho Yoonji strode in. And her uniform was crisp despite the hour, and her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun that made her look even more severe than usual. Director Bei, the Admiral said, "I assume you have already confirmed the ambassador's report." "Confirmed and updated," Jiwan replied. "The fleet is larger than the initial intercept suggested, and they are not slowing down for any kind of negotiation." Admiral Cho moved to the central display and studied the tactical projection. That showed the approaching fleet as a mass of red dots moving steadily toward the blue marble of Earth. "Parliament has called an emergency session," the Admiral said. "They want options. There's only one option that keeps humanity alive," Jiwan replied. "And it is not surrender." She pulled up a new display, and it showed a complex web of hidden assets scattered throughout the solar system. And Admiral Cho's eyebrows rose slightly as she recognized what she was looking at. "Project Ember," the Admiral murmured. "I thought that was still theoretical." "It was theoretical 5 years ago," Jiwan said. "It has been operational for 18 months. And the Council has no idea it exists." Project Ember was the product of paranoid planning and secret budgets, and it represented humanity's answer to the question that had haunted their strategists since first contact. What do we do if the galaxy turns against us? Hidden weapons platforms drifted in the asteroid belt, disguised as mining equipment, and stealth ships waited in the shadows of Jupiter's moons. And every civilian freighter in Earth's fleet carried concealed weapons that could be activated with a single code phrase. This still will not be enough to defeat 300 warships, Admiral Cho observed. "No," Jiwan agreed. "But it will be enough to make them bleed. And bleeding is something the Council has not done in a very long time." The Parliament convened in the great chamber beneath Geneva, and representatives from every nation on Earth and every colony in human space filled the seats and watched as the situation was explained to them. Some called for immediate surrender because the lives of billions should not be risked on. Others demanded that humanity fight to the last. Breath, because slavery was worse than death. But it was President Moon Chae-young who stood and asked the question that mattered. Director Bay, she said, and her voice carried the weight of a species. Can we survive this? Ji-won stepped forward and faced the assembly. And she knew that her next words would determine the fate of every human being alive. We cannot win a direct confrontation with the Council fleet, she said. Their technology is superior, and their numbers are overwhelming. But we do not need to win a direct confrontation. She activated the holographic display and showed them a map of the solar system covered in hidden assets. We need to make this war so costly that the Council decides we are not worth the price, she continued. We need to show them that humanity will never stop fighting, that every inch of ground they take will cost them dearly, and that even if they conquer Earth, they will spend the next 1,000 years dealing with human resistance. And if that is not enough, a representative from the European bloc asked, then we die free, Ji-won replied. But I do not believe it will come to that because the Council is not a unified force. And there are cracks in their alliance that we can exploit. Admiral Cho stepped forward to explain the military strategy. And she outlined how the hidden defenses would slow the fleet, and how the stealth ships would strike at their supply lines, and how the ground forces would make every city a fortress. When she finished, the Parliament voted. And the result was not even close. Humanity would fight in orbit above Earth. The United Fleet began its preparations. And Captain Kale Min-yuk stood on the bridge of the ESV Defiance and read the orders that had just arrived on his personal terminal. His first officer, Lieutenant Shin Yuna, watched his face as he read, and she could tell from his expression that the orders were unusual. Captain? She prompted. Min-yuk looked up, and there was something fierce in his eyes. Something that made Yuna feel both excited and afraid. We are not staying to defend Earth, he said quietly so that only she could hear. Sir? We have been given a different mission, he continued. And he handed her the terminal so she could read for herself. Yuna's eyes widened as she absorbed the information. And when she looked up at her captain, she understood why he had that look on his face. This is a suicide mission, she said. Probably, Min-yuk agreed. But if we succeed, the Council will never recover, and humanity will have a chance. The Defiance was the fastest and most advanced ship in the Earth fleet, and it had been designed for exactly this kind of operation. And its crew had been selected because they were the best, and because they were willing to die for something larger than themselves. Set course for the edge of the system. Min-yuk ordered the helm. We leave in 1 hour. As the Defiance prepared for departure, Min-yuk received one more message. And this one was from Ambassador Yoon Seo-jin, Captain, her recorded voice said. I am sending you coordinates and access codes for a contact who will meet you outside Council space. And this contact is a defector from one of the Council species. And they have information that could change everything. The message ended with coordinates that pointed toward a dead system on the edge of nowhere. And Min-yuk smiled because dead systems were exactly where you met people who did not want to be found. New course. He told the helm. We have a friend to pick up. The Defiance slipped away from Earth as the United Fleet formed up for battle. And no one except the highest command knew where she was going, or why behind them the Council fleet continued its advance. And its commanders were confident that this would be a quick and easy subjugation. And they had no idea that humanity had been preparing for this moment since the day they first looked up at the stars and wondered what was watching them. The war for Earth had begun, and humanity was ready to show the galaxy what happened when you pushed them into a corner. Ambassador Yoon Seo-jin stood at the viewport of her shuttle and watched the massive station grow larger against the stars. And she felt the weight of what was coming pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing. Sovereignty Council Station hung above Thesser Prime like a metal moon, and its size was meant to intimidate every species that approached it. And it worked because even after 5 years of dealing with the council, she still felt small when she looked at her aide. A young man named Park Jin-hyuk stepped up beside her and cleared his throat. "Ambassador, we dock in 15 minutes, he said, and his voice was steady, but she could see the tension in his jaw. "Thank you, Jin-hyuk," she replied without looking away from the station. "Do we have any idea what this summons is about?" "Nothing concrete," he admitted, "but the intelligence reports suggest it has something to do with our expansion into the Velar sector." Seojin nodded slowly because she had suspected as much. And humanity had been growing too fast for the council's comfort. And this meeting was probably their way of telling her to slow down. The shuttle docked with a gentle thump and the airlock cycled open. And 2 council guards stood waiting for them in the corridor beyond. And their armor gleamed under the harsh lights. "Ambassador Yoon," one of them said in a flat mechanical voice that came from a translator device. "The council awaits you in the grand chamber." She followed them through winding corridors that seemed designed to confuse visitors. And the walls were covered in symbols from a dozen different species. And each one represented a member of the Sovereignty Council. The grand chamber was enormous. And 12 platforms rose in a semicircle around a central floor where Sajin was expected to stand. And on each platform sat a representative of the council's member species. Council of Earth occupied the highest platform. And he looked down at her with compound eyes that showed no emotion. And his insectoid body was wrapped in robes of deep purple that marked his status as council leader, Ambassador Yoon Seojin of Earth. Vareth spoke, and his voice buzzed through the chamber like wind through dead leaves. "You have been summoned to receive the will of the Sovereignty Council." Seojin bowed her head slightly because protocol demanded it. But she kept her eyes on Vareth because she had learned never to show weakness before him. "I am honored to stand before the council," she said. And her voice carried clearly through the vast space. "Honor is not why you are here," Vareth replied. And something in his tone made her stomach tighten. "You are here because humanity has become a problem." A murmur passed through the other counselors. And Seojin noticed that several of them looked uncomfortable. And that told her this decision had not been unanimous. "The council does not recognize problems," Seojin said carefully. "The council recognizes challenges and addresses them through dialogue and cooperation." Pretty words. Vareth clicked his mandibles together in what might have been amusement. "But words cannot change what your species has done. And your expansion threatens the stability we have maintained for 3,000 years. He raised one segmented limb, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. And it showed human colonies spreading across a map of the galaxy like ripples in water. In 112 years since achieving faster than light travel, humanity has established 73 colonies across 41 systems, Vareth said. Your population grows at a rate that exceeds every other spacefaring species combined. And your hunger for resources shows no sign of slowing. We have violated no treaties, Seojin pointed out. Every system we have settled was unclaimed, and every resource we have gathered was legally obtained. Legality is not the issue. Another counselor spoke up. And this one was a tall being with gray skin and 3 eyes that blinked in sequence. The issue is what humanity might become if this growth continues unchecked. Seojin felt anger rise in her chest, but she pushed it down because showing emotion would only hurt her position. And what exactly does the council believe we might become? Shiaskedvrith leaned forward on his platform, and his compound eyes seemed to bore into her soul. A threat, he said simply. Perhaps not today, and perhaps not in 100 years. But eventually humanity will look at the galaxy and decide that it should belong to you. And we cannot allow that future to happen. So you have already judged us for crimes we have not committed, Seojin replied. And this time she did not hide the edge in her voice. We have judged the pattern of your species, Vareth said. and we have decided to act before that pattern reaches its inevitable conclusion." He tapped his limb against his platform, and the holographic display changed. And now it showed a document covered in alien text. "Directive 7 Alpha," Vareth announced. "Effective immediately, Earth must comply with the following requirements." Seojin listened as he read through the list. And with each requirement, she felt her heart sink deeper into her stomach. Humanity must surrender all military vessels to Council Oversight. Humanity must halt all expansion and restrict itself to 3 approved systems. Humanity must submit to Council governance of all political decisions. Humanity must accept Council observers in every branch of government and military. This is not a directive, Seojin said when he finished. This is a demand for total surrender. Call it what you wish, Vareth replied. These terms are not negotiable, and humanity will comply or face the consequences. I need time to consult with Earth's leadership, Seojin said. And her mind was racing through possibilities and finding none of them good. You have 72 hours, Vareth said. When that time expires, we expect full compliance. The dismissal was clear, and Seojin turned to leave. But she stopped at the entrance and looked back at the 12 platforms. The Council makes a mistake today, she said. And her voice was quiet, but it carried through the silence. Humanity does not kneel. She walked out before any of them could respond, and her aide fell into step beside her. And neither of them spoke until they were back aboard their shuttle and pulling away from the station. That was a declaration of war, Junhyuk said. And his face was pale. No, Seojin replied as she moved to the communications console. That was the Council telling us to die quietly. And we are going to disappoint them. She began entering codes into the console. And these were codes she had hoped never to use. And they would send an encrypted message directly to Earth Defense Intelligence. But before she could finish the transmission, a light blinked on the console, and it indicated an intercepted signal. And when she decoded it, her blood ran cold. The message was simple, and it was meant for the Council fleet stationed 3 systems away. And it contained only 2 words that changed everything. Proceed immediately. Seojin stared at the screen and understood that the 72 hours had been a lie, and that the Council fleet was already on its way to Earth, and that humanity had been condemned before she ever stepped into that chamber. Get me a direct line to Admiral Cho, she ordered, and her voice was steel wrapped in ice. Tell her the war has already begun. The shuttle accelerated toward the jump point, and behind them the Council station glittered like a malevolent jewel. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, a fleet of 300 warships was racing toward the planet that had raised humanity. From the mud, the Council wanted control. They were about to learn what happened when they tried to take it.